I know, just the hours, yeah. Oh, sure, sure, no.
All right. So welcome everyone to Friendship and Feud, about the friendship and feud between Zora, Neale, Hurston and Langston, Hughes. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, along with my partner, Dr. Jacob. We have the lovely Kai Miller volunteering today at the Bureau. Thank you. So the Bureau, for those who don't know, is a government agency for a government that does not yet exist. And the main service that we provide is just holding this space for queer culture. So we have regular bookstore hours Wednesdays through Sundays from 1 to 7 p.m. And then we often stay open later when we have events such as this. We are an all-volunteer organization, so we do have a suggested donation of $10, but whatever you're able to give, if you're able to give, we appreciate it. So there's change in the bag. I'll pass that around. You can also Venmo us at BGSQD for those of you who are online, but I'll pass this around. And if you're not already on our email list and you would like to be, you can sign up for that at the back of the room, and you'll get an email every other Monday about our upcoming events. And that is it for me. I'm going to pass it over to Jimmy Wright, aka James Wright, union organizer, scholar, all around beautiful human being. Please welcome James Wright.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. We will be joined doing a program on Zora, Neale, Hurston and Langston, Hughes. It will be about their friendship, their working together collectively, and also their termination of that friendship. And along the way, we will be discussing some of the people that were involved. In your flyer, there are some names that we will mention. And we decided that rather than talk about them, I would give you some information on them. So this afternoon, my co-worker, Connie, will be doing the video. Oh, wow. And I'd like to thank her for all of the hard work. To start off, we will give a little background on these two authors. And Allison and I will give the background on Zora and Langston.
Okay. Let me just get rid of this.
Zora Neale Hurston was a novelist, playwright, folklorist, and anthropologist who challenged defined roles both in her writing and in her personal life. Born in 1891, she was a free thinker who didn't conform to society's expectation of women. She wore pants, smoked cigarettes in public, and put her work before her relationships. Her early life is spent in Eatonville, Florida, the first all-Black incorporated township in America. Her mother had a very positive and enduring influence in Hurston. She encouraged her to be adventurous, independent, and ambitious. By contrast, her father made an effort to tamp down her expectations and cautioned her to act white. While he was a Baptist minister and the mayor of the township, he was also a morally weak philanderer. When he was just a Christian, it's a good story. When she was just a preteen, Hurston's mother died and her father sent her away from Eatonville. Although she struggled for some years and worked a variety of jobs, she eventually enrolled in Barnard College as a transfer student from Howard University. She was the college's first Black graduate in 1928. At Barnard, she studied anthropology and was greatly influenced by Franz Boas, a highly regarded scientist who headed Columbia's anthropology department. Boas believed in the historic importance of African and Southern Black culture as a transmitted legacy of Africa. Hurston was inspired by Boas and became committed to studying and preserving the folklore and dialect of Southern Black rural culture. To this end, she engaged in extensive field studies in the South and in the Caribbean, where she immersed herself in the study of voodoo, poverty, religion, and how it affected their lives. The quote, "There is something about poverty that smells like death. Dead dreams dropping off the heart like leaves in a dry season and rotting around the feet. Impulses smothered too long in a fetid air of underground caves. The soul lives in sickly air. People can be slave ships and shoes." The field study results are documented in her works, including Tell My Horse and Every Tongue Got to Confess, as well as various musical reviews and academic articles. She wrote in dialect in her fictional works, an approach that was aided by her field studies. But she drew sharp criticism for this, and author Richard Wright likened her to that of a minstrel show, and wrote that Hurston's characters swing like a pendulum in that a safe and narrow orbit in which America likes to see the Negro lie between laughter and tears. Hurston was fundamentally different of the value of Southern Black culture, and unlike others, she embraced Black rural life. She used dialect in her writings and raised it to the level of poetry. She also differed from her contemporaries in her political views and held conservative beliefs as a Republican. Hurston authored 2 works that appeared in Fire, a short story, Sweat, and Color Struck, a play in 4 scenes.
James Langston Hughes was the son of James Nathaniel Hughes, who was a bookkeeper, and Carrie Mercer Langston, who was a stenographer and a typist. Langston lived basically with his grandmother in Lincoln, Illinois, Chicago, Ohio, and Kansas City, and also Chicago, Illinois. The grandmother moved often. His grandmother, Carrie, husband, was killed during the John Brown, during the John Brown raids in the South, when John Brown decided to free these Black enslaved. Langston completed high school in Ohio, and then he moved with his father to Mexico for a year. Langston's father agreed to pay his college tuition only if he went to a white college and took business courses. After a year at Columbia University, he transferred to the University in Pennsylvania, where he graduated. Hughes traveled for 2 years, from 1922 to 24, on various steamships as a dishwasher, a cook, assistant, visiting Holland, France, Spain, the Congo, Libya, and several other African countries. He returned to the US working various jobs in Washington, DC area before returning to New York and graduating from the University and graduating in 1928 from the university. During the Negro Renaissance, he published 4 books. And we will continue, Allison and I, with the biographies after Lewis and Lynette. I'm sorry, before that, Connie will discuss the playwright who allowed us to do this play, Lawrence Holder.
Lawrence Holder is an American playwright, poet, and director who focuses on the African-American experience. Holder attended the City College of New York, from which he received a bachelor's degree in geology and a master's in creative writing. His plays often center around historical African-American figures, including Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, Thelonious Monk, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, and Zora Neale Hurston, just to name a few. He is a 1998-1999 Otto Rene Castillo Award recipient for political theater and has won numerous awards for his works. Holder's work has been performed at the Henry Street Settlement, New Federal Theater, the Ford Theater, the American Place Theater, and more. His work has been reviewed by the New York Times and the Washington Post, among others. In addition to being a playwright, Holder taught English at John Jay College of Criminal Justice.
We will now have an excerpt from one of his plays. He's written 5 plays on Zora Neale Hurston. He's absolutely fascinated by her, and he praises Alice Walker to the Heights for resurrecting Zora Neale Hurston. And Allison will give you some more information on Zora Neale Hurston at a later date. Right now, Lynette and Lewis will do an excerpt from the play.
So you know Wallace has had an idea for an anthology.
I don't know, I didn't know.
I mention it so you don't go ahead and accidentally steal his ideas.
Accidentally steal, Langston, haven't I shared all of my ideas with you?
Yes,
Then it can't be stealing anything from anyone. I'm sharing my ideas with you. Are you sharing them with him?
no,
Well, I thought we call it fire, the analogy.
you cannot call it that. That is what he wants to call it. Have you been talking to him?
We bump into each other occasionally.
Well, you explain it to him. Fire.
I will, Langston. He likes everything I do. Ha 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 ha. When friends are this intimate, Langston, there's nothing they can't tell each other, right?
You keep harping on this intimacy thing. Some people might even get the wrong impression about us.
Langston, I positively, absolutely will not propose to you. I need my peace to my quiet to write.
Yes, well, that is what I was trying to say, and what with godmothering you.
I know the line, I'm getting anything done. Boz has me writing my thesis over and over again. The man's killing me, and godmother thinks I'm writing my primitive dialect for a novel I'm working on, and she doesn't want that. And neither must find out I'm working with the other one, because if they do find out, it's kiss the scholarship and the money goodbye. So I'm split in 3 too.
Can you just tell godmother that one dialect writer in the family should be enough?
You don't like dialect writing, do you? She stands there looking at him closely as he formulates his answer.
I like it well enough.
then why won't you write it instead of like Alien Lockheed or one of the others with their noses up in the air?
I don't write like any of the others. We have gone over all this territory before. Let us drop it. I just want to get some help with Gamma.
You are spoiling for a fight with her. You came in here ready to pull her hair out.
Sounds like you're taking this personal.
Can you blame me?
What is that got to do with anything?
She get it published for you?
Same way she's getting your work published.
Touchy.
My poetry is being published thanks to no one but Harb and Fletcher. So I am through. I don't need to think anything wrong about my work. I seem to write just fine. Thank you. Tell Godmother she can keep her ideas, her money, her influence.
I will deliver the message. The father of the weary Bruce is a big time name.
Thank you.
Thank you. Langston and Zora first met at the Civic Club affair. Stephen will give us background on that happening. Stephen?
I'll be talking about a dinner, a fancy banquet at a private club in Manhattan, which turned out to be a major landmark event in the history of the Harlem Renaissance. To do so, I need to introduce Charles Johnson, a man of many talents, who's a major figure in African American and American history generally. Johnson was born in 1893 in Virginia, the eldest of 6 children. He attended the University of Chicago and then served in the military in World War I. Upon his return to Chicago, he witnessed one of the worst race riots in American history. As a consequence, he became involved with Chicago's Race Relations Commission and helped write The Negro in Chicago, a study of race relations in a race riot, published in 1922. Johnson was a champion of civil rights throughout his life and the author of several sociological studies of Black life in America, including Growing Up in the Black Belt and Patterns of Negro Segregation. Later in life, he became the president of Fisk College, and he worked tirelessly in helping to improve interracial relations under Presidents Roosevelt and Truman. After the Second World War, Johnson was one of the 10 American delegates sent to Paris for the first conference of the newly established UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. He died in 1956. What concerns us today is the critical role played by Johnson in the Harlem Renaissance. In 1923, he founded and began editing the National Urban League's Opportunity, a journal of Negro life. His stated objective was to present a publication in which, quote, accurate and dependable facts can correct inaccurate and slanderous assertions that have gone unchallenged, and to depict Negro life as it is with no exaggerations, end quote. Johnson maintained that the cultural life of the Negro had been terribly neglected, and he wanted America to see the authentic soul of the Negro, which he felt could only be done through the arts. To accomplish this, he began publishing literary and artistic works by new and talented Black artists. He was aware, however, that for many of these artists to survive, they would need to break the world of mainstream publishing. Langston Hughes, for example, was working at the time as a busboy while his poems were being published. Wallace Thurman and poet Arno Bontemps were making the living working for the post office, and Eric Douglas was surviving as a poorly paid teacher in the segregated Kansas City school. To achieve his aims, Johnson began a series of contests with prizes of $100 or more to get more attention given to these artists. Still, he realized this was not enough. What was needed was an opportunity for many of these talented young Black writers and artists to meet face-to-face with some of the influential publishers and editors of the white world, and thus get their attention and financial support. And so he came up with the idea of a coming out party, a dazzling affair, the likes of which New York had never before seen. The excuse was the publication of Jessie Redmond Fawcett's There Is Confusion, considered to be the first novel to emerge from the Negro Renaissance. The dinner was planned for March 21st, 1924, at the New York Civic Club, the city's only upper-class integrated club located on 12th Street off Fifth Avenue. Where Gwendolyn Bennett, along with Louise Patterson, a social worker in New York married to a prominent member of the American Communist Party, and Georgie Douglas Johnson, a Washington, D.C. poet known for literary salons, were instrumental in getting together guests. In attendance were Langston Hughes, County Cullen, famed playwright Eugene O'Neill, literary critic H.L. Mencken, and the publishers from Scribner's, Harper's, Liberite, and Survey Graphic. Other guests included Carl Van Doren, the influential editor of Century Magazine, and W.E.B. Du Bois, recently returned from Africa. Black scholar and philosopher Alan Locke was the master of ceremonies. In the course of the evening, speeches were given. Albert Barnes wrote about his collection of African art, and County Cullen and Gwendolyn Bennett read poetry. In all, 110 people attended. The most important publication to emerge from the evening was a collection of the papers and speeches from the event, which appeared in a special Harlem issue of the Survey Graphic. Its two printings of more than 40,000 copies sold out almost immediately. Groundwork was now in place for the New Negro, edited by Alan Locke and considered the defining text of the Harlem Renaissance. From this point on, white publishers now began enthusiastically backing the works of Black writers and artists. Black writers and artists assisting their cause and providing American literature with a much needed shot of new energy and inspiration. One might also note that Civic Club dinner was the site of Zora and Neale Hurston's first meeting with Langston Hughes.
In your flyer, you will see the New Negro. And those are some of the writers that for the first time was published. With the, as Stephen said, this was really the beginning of the Harlem Renaissance. This publication. And Locke took full credit. He actually took it. But this was Langston and Zora's first meeting. And they became friends through this. Their second meeting, Langston and Zora Neale Hurston would meet once again in the spring of 1927. Langston was invited to read his poetry at Fisk University commencement. From there, he planned to do other readings in the area, but the great Mississippi flood canceled those plans. Instead, he went to Louisiana, where he ran into Zora. She was touring the South in her car, collecting material for research. Together, they spent several months driving through the rural South, collecting folk songs and stories. They returned to New York, and Langston introduced Zora to the patron Charlotte Mason, known as Godmother. Under Mrs. Mason's sponsorship, they would collaborate on several projects. One in 1926 was the magazine Fire. And Dominic will read Langston's poem on fire. Yes.
Fire, fire, Lord, fire gonna burn my soul. I ain't been good, I ain't been clean. I've been stinking, low down, mean. Fire, fire, Lord, fire gonna burn my soul. Tell me, brother, do you believe that if you want to get to heaven, got to moan and grieve? Fire, fire, Lord, fire gonna burn my soul. I've been stealing. I've been telling lies. I've had more women than Pharaoh had wives. Fire, Lord, fire gonna burn my soul. I mean, fire. Fire gonna burn my soul. All
Read some of the reviews. The magazine there was only one issue. One of the reasons is because of the reviews, and also the other reason that Fire did not succeed is, I think it was $4 for the magazine, which usually these magazines sold for maybe 50 cents or $1, $2 at most. So what we're going to do, Pino and Dominic and I, we're going to read some of these reviews. Okay, you want to come up so we can read?
Yeah, I can read it on it. Just kidding. Wait a minute. First. Yes, okay.
Fire was created by Wallace Thurman and his group of young rebels because of their discontent with the established Negro publication, such as Crisis, Opportunity, and Negro World. The editors of Fire wanted the freedom to produce their art as they chose, free of political propaganda. So the magazine premiered in December 1926. It was ignored by a majority of the white critics. Only two noted its debut, the Bookman and the Saturday Review. And these are some of the reviews of Fire.
Yeah.
All right.
She get closer to the mic.
Sure. Be proudly critic. If Uncle Sam ever find out about it, fire. It will be disbarred from the mail.
It says Theophilus Lewis, the critic. Fire, for the most part, nauseates me. And after the dirtier parts of it, I felt like taking a bath.
Eileen Locke. The strong sex radicalization of many of the contributors will offend and shock many, as will the flamboyant and scandalous decadence.
That was Alan.
That was Alan Locke. Can you imagine him of all people?
This is AJ Rogers. I found it unsanitary, repulsive, vile, and degrading. There is a preference for uttering unpleasant or forbidden things.
And this is Crisis magazine. Langston Hughes is truly the low-rate poet of Harlem.
Oh my God.
Alan Douglas has spoiled 3 perfectly good pages and a cover with his ink pudge.
I have just tossed the first issue of Fire into the fire. These were some of the reviews of the magazine itself. The reason was they decided they were going to do a magazine that would shock. So of the 7 writers, each one took a theme that would shock. One took a 15-year-old girl who was a prostitute. Another had this gay fella going around town and seducing young men. Zora wrote a play in dialect, and the wife kills the husband. So these were some of the themes of Fire. And what happened is they put it in the basement, like maybe 500 of them. And at 137th Street and what was called then Lenox Avenue. And there was a fire in the basement that destroyed almost all the magazines. What's his name? One of the writers kept 2 or 3 copies of it, and that's how they were able to reissue it in the 1970s. It's now, you can get the magazine complete for $25.
From where?
Barnes and Noble and Strand.
Oh,
If you go online, it may be more.
I'll see if we can get
Yeah.
it.
So we will have a 10-minute intermission. We will come back and we will read, or rather the actors will perform Zora and Langston from the play, Zora and Langston. Okay? If you like some refreshments, you're welcome. And I want to say thank you to the 2 performers because I mailed the stuff and you know, mail. But so they got this really late. And Lynette came all the way from Washington to read. Louis came from the Bronx, and they still, both of them got the mail.
So just to keep everybody on time, it is now 6:40, so if we could make our way back at exactly 6:50, so that we can then resume the program. I'm in charge of time.
Yeah. We still have some. Yes.
Yeah, right. Yes, yes. Yeah. Everybody.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, every 2 weeks, give me a couple of
Colors. Chill and sit there.
Yeah.
Broiled or?
Okay. To me, that's a people going to or not rust. But I love that.
There's one And so, and, no, there is water, there is soda, and there is something else. No.
Seltzer.
Okay, very close. Okay, there's some. So, get it? We're not gonna let the inside.
I agree. Thanks, James.
And then, yeah. That's Langston and Zora. Yes. When you achieve it, it's like 30 miles away. Yeah, but there's like 10 years.
Well, I had read Black Oak Cherry.
Those are the two now?
Yeah. I have, Harlem Library anthology. I loved.
I mean, well, it's done.
I love Black.
I'm surprised that Alan. I mean, I know he was all.
So do you.
I before we.
I think his character,
Yes, we did.
Anything like this, he went down. Right. He's the character in that novel.
Yes.
Stop acting like that. No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you gotta. Yeah. Some, complete faith.
Yeah.
Even the some of Zora, friend. Yeah.
Now, the godmother character is the character in the spring. Owner of the apartment?
No,
That's the.
no.
Okay. I'm trying to map.
No, that was a lady, who owned the building.
Yeah.
And on this,
Be
she was
like-
in love, and she felt as though had been audited in this building.
Yeah.
So she allowed me to do this.
It would work. But they spent all day drinking. They were in the more jail. That's it. Yeah, they were living life, not experience. It's right
And
about
that's how come Zora nicknamed it. Nick, how you pronounce it?
Niggerati Manor.
Well, that's what she named it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the most. Well, that's the way it was.
Right.
But, yeah. And so she's very generous. Giving.
No, how are you? Yeah, that's.
Or should we start? Is it time?
You have.
Oh, I got my gun, I'll take
No,
that.
Okay,
You have 2 minutes.
okay,
It is.
Do you want me to give the 2-minute warning?
yeah.
So we have about 2 minutes left before we begin the program, resume the program, I should say. So you start.
Louise Patterson.
You do, yeah, you're doing her biography. Are you reading her biography?
One of the very interesting people in this trio is Louise Patterson. So I'm gonna give you some background on her. She's a feminist, an activist, a rebel, a communist, and very active in left-wing causes and civil human rights. She was born in 1901 in Chicago. She was the only child, and her parents separated several years after her birth. The family then moved to the West Coast. Louise was often the only Black child in her class. She was often the target of vicious racial insults. In spite of the verbal abuse, she excelled and graduated head of her class in high school. In 1919, Louise enrolled at the University of California at Berkeley. She graduated with honors in 1923, majoring in economics. Her minor was social work. While at the university, she met W.E.B. Du Bois, who encouraged her to become involved in politics and civil rights issues. She taught at several Black colleges in the South, including the Hampton Institute. In 1927, she received a scholarship from the Urban League to pursue her graduate studies at the New School in New York. She worked as a social worker for several years. In 1928, she married the gay novelist editor, Wallace Thurman. They separated several months later when she found out he was gay. But the court battle continued for years. At the time of his death in 1934, the couple was still legally married. Patterson became a major participant in the Negro movement. Because of her friendship with so many of them, such as Gwendolyn Bennett, Aaron Douglas, Bruce Nugent, and others, she was employed by Mrs. Charlotte Mason as the secretary to Zora, Neale Hurston, and Langston Hughes while they were writing the play Mule Bone. Patterson was very active locally. She joined the Communist Party officially in 1933 and was elected national secretary and was nicknamed by her enemies as Madame Moscow. She headed the New York Committee for the Scottsboro Nine and helped organize a march to Washington on their behalf. She attended the 1937 Paris World Congress against racism and fascism and reported on it for Black news services. With Langston Hughes, she co-founded the Howard Suitcase Theater in 1937. If you look at your flyer, you will see information there, and it's about Louise heading a company to go to Moscow in 1934. they were to, Langston was hired to write the screenplay, it was to be called Black and White. The government pressured the Soviet Union, so it was never done. Louise, we found out, thanks to Connie, has a huge,
So
please
Louise,
explain.
yeah, so Louise, because of her activities with the Communist Party, and she was married to someone who was very prominent in that party in the United States. In researching with Jimmy, I found her FBI file online. It's I think it's like a 20-page document, and they basically tapped her phone, followed her, like what they did with all, at that time. That's what the FBI did. They investigated. So it's very interesting. It's now actually part of the FBI archives, and you can read it. Like if you look up Louise T. Patterson, FBI archives, you can actually read her FBI file. So very interesting.
So everyone, Gwendolyn Bennett, Langston Hughes, Nugent, all these people went to the Soviet Union, and they all ended up with FBI files. It was 5 of them from that Negro Renaissance that went there. It was a group of 22, and 6 of them were part of that Negro Renaissance movement. And they all ended up with FBI files. Many of them, like Langston, ended up staying there for a year and traveling about. Louise did the same thing. Many ended up going to Europe and staying, and about half came back. But especially the ones that stayed in Europe or in the Soviet Union, they had vows. We will continue now with the scene again from Lawrence Holden's play, Zora and Langston.
Will you still have time for the play? And thank you for coming to me in your moment of triumph and so grateful.
Yeah, let us write a play. Let us write the most successful thing Broadway has ever seen.
Now that's a tune.
Okay, but that was. Now that's a tune.
Something authentic, something so real, they have to stand up and cheer.
And what is the story?
The variation of one of many Bible stories.
Really?
It's about 2 hunters out in the woods. Now they don't know each other, but they see and shoot the same deer. Naturally, each claims it as his own.
Fascinating.
And then they both see they have a deep problem on their hands.
Who shot the deer and what do you call it?
Mule bone.
Mule? Why not deer bone?
Mule bone is a more immediate Langston. You know, I've been dreaming about this my whole life. Am I really here? Are you there? I've seen the moment in my mind's eye, in my dreams, and my nightmares. Godmother talked to me.
What is the matter again?
Nothing, Langston, absolutely nothing. When shall we meet again? She is breathless with anticipation as she rummages in her bag and comes up with a script, which she hands him. Here's my first script.
Really?
I'm always working on this or something, Langston.
Give me a couple of days to read it, then we can meet and talk.
This was the third offering that Langston and Zora were about to do. And this was the one that ended their friendship. There were quite a few people instigating it. There was Godmother, Mrs. Mason. There was Alan Locke also, because Alan Locke was very frustrated with Langston because he didn't have an affair with him and kept standing him up. Langston seemed to have always been very polite. He would never say no. He just didn't show up. It greatly frustrated. So Langston, Locke, to get his revenge, started telling Godmother that they were in New Jersey partying and drinking and having an affair. He also had Zora thinking that Louise Patterson and Langston were having an affair. The problem was, while Langston and Louise were doing the play, very often Zora was traveling. She was doing her anthropology work. So she came back, she was under the impression Langston had done this. And to her shock, she found out Louise was giving him ideas about what to do. Because originally, the two men were arguing over a bone. And it was Louise who said, that's not interesting enough. You need to have them argue over a woman. It will make it more interesting. And Zora somewhat fought it because she felt this was her play. Because she originally wrote the short story for the play. And they took her short story, and because Langston had written plays that were quite successful, in fact, one of his plays made it to Broadway. It was called Mulatto. And it was the most successful Black play until Lorraine Hansberry wrote A Raisin in the Sun. It ran a year and a half on Broadway, and Langston said he never received a dime for it. And even though he sued, he tried to get it, but he never received any money during the whole time the play was on Broadway for some reason. So she knew that Langston knew how to write dialogue for a play. So what he was supposed to do is write the dialogue, and she would set it up, the scenario. And when she found out Louise was giving Langston ideas, she went bananas. She threatened him. They sued each other about the play. Yes?
I said, wow.
So the play was never produced until 2000,
No, 1990,
1999.
1991.
The play was produced at Lincoln Center in 1991 after both of them had passed. Each time the play was about to be produced, one of them would bring a lawsuit. Because there were two versions of the play. There was Langston's version and there was Zora's. And they could never decide who wrote which version. So they would have their lawyers and they would be suing each other about the play. So it was not produced during their lifetime. So we're going to continue the biographical information. Allison.
Hurston wrote 4 novels, an autobiography, short stories, plays, and essays. Her most popular work is the 1937 novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God. Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. For some, they come in with the tide. For others, they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing until the watcher turns his eyes away in resignation. His dreams mocked by death to time. That is the life of men. Now, women forget all those things they don't want to remember, and remember everything they don't want to forget. The dream is the truth. Then they act and do things accordingly. At the end of her life in 1960, she lived in Florida with little money, and all of her books were out of print when she died. She died on January 28, 1960, at age 69 after suffering a stroke. Her neighbors in Fort Pierce, Florida, had a take-a-book collection for her February 7th funeral. The collection didn't yield enough to pay for a headstone, however, and Hurston was buried in a grave that remained unmarked until 1973. More than a decade later, Alice Walker, who was inspired by Hurston, championed a revival of interest in her work and life. Walker also ensured that a stone was placed on Hurston's grave that honored her with the inscription that read, "A genius of the South." With respect to an afterlife, Hurston, an atheist, wrote, "The springing of the yellow line of morning out of the misty deep of dawn is glory enough for me. I know that nothing is destructible, things merely change forms. When the consciousness we all know as life ceases, I know that I shall still be a part and parcel of the world. I was a part before the sun rolled into shape and burst forth in the glory of change. I was when the earth was hurled from its fiery rim. I shall return with the earth to Father Sun and still exist in substance when the sun has lost its fire and disintegrated into infinity to perhaps become a part of the whirling rubble of space. Why fear? The stuff of being is matter, ever changing, ever moving, but never lost. So what need of denominations and creeds to deny myself the comfort of all of my fellow men? The wide belt of the universe has no need for finger rings. I am one with the infinite and need no other assurance."
Langston did not return to the US after going to Russia for this failed project. He stayed in the Soviet Union, traveling, and he visited various countries there. While he was there, he wrote a novel, a collection of short stories, and that's when he had problems with discovering the United States. In response to the Great Depression, certain features of his work were altered, especially while he was in the Soviet Union that year. He became radicalized. Hughes wrote some of the most radical poems ever published by an American, as well as some of the, as well as the essays. He wrote about America's social ills, as in Let America Be America Again. Some of his radical poems were anti-Christ, such as Goodbye Christ. These would haunt Langston's career for the rest of his life. Under that pressure, Hughes himself eventually repudiated these poems, and he suppressed them. He made this statement: politics in any country in the world is dangerous. For the poet, politics in any country in the world had better be dignified as poetry. Politics can be the graveyard of the poet, and only poetry can be his resurrection. Langston was haunted by the government up until the end of his life. he was unable to get a job at any college, black or white, because of what he wrote during that time in the Soviet Union. He could only, and sometimes when he went even on lectures, they would have people outside protesting or at the university or college. He never recovered from that time. They made him go before the Un-American Activities Committee. And after he would not name names, they still would not release him or move him from the what was called the red channels. And because of that, he couldn't get jobs. He was dependent on the poetry, the plays, and his traveling until the end of his life. His ashes are at the Schomburg. As you enter the building, that's where his ashes were. They're trying to turn, in 1947, he bought a brownstone in Harlem, 128th between Madison and 5th. And that's where he lived until the end of his life. Thank you. Are there any questions? Any questions for?
Is there a plaque where some kind of some statement at 128th Street between Madison and at that time?
Yes, there is. If you go to the 5th Avenue, they have a sign under the street, but his home is still there, but they were trying to turn it into a museum, but they haven't succeeded.
What about a landmark?
That's the only landmark.
And did they say this was the home?
No. Do they now? They do now.
Yeah, it's called Langston Hughes Place, and if I, we're on 128 further west. I believe it's 127.
It is?
Yeah, not 128.
Right, 128 is the school, the Renaissance school. You're right.
And it says, I think that there's a sign that says Langston Hughes something, like under the, they've named it.
Yes, but just that one place.
That one block.
Yes, just that one.
The house too, I think, has a.
The house has something on it. Yes. Any other?
That was very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you. Any questions about Zora? Allison can answer them.
Well, I have a question about Fire magazine. How many issues did they?
Only that one. In fact, Wallace Thurman was haunted until he died for payment because all 7 of the artists had agreed to pay $100. The problem was none of them were working. Thurman was the only one working. He had a job at a white publishing company because he was so great at proofreading. It was alleged he was the fastest proofreader. So he was the only one working. So he signed. So they haunted him until he died. And then Louise Thompson was determined she's gonna get alimony since she married him and he didn't tell her he was gay. So she thought she should get something. So he was very much haunted by that. And he died another tragic death at Welfare Island of tuberculosis.
I have a question. Do you think that Zora and Langston both regretted not ever speaking to each other?
They both regret. Langston never commented. Even in his autobiography, he played it like it was almost something that didn't bother him, but it bothers him very much. Zora spoke about it, but again, she didn't write anything about it in her autobiography.
Do you think
She
it was too
didn't-
painful for them?
I think it was too painful. It was, friendships for Zora was very hard. She was, as Allison said, very bodacious, very opinionated. And she wore pants, she smoked in public. The only habit she didn't have was drinking. She did not drink. And when the tragedies hit her, there was no one there to support her. None of the people that were alive of the Renaissance supported her, even though she was exonerated. They threw the case out of court. She was so heartbroken, she went back to Florida. But either of them ever recovered. But Zora was very bitter about it. Yes.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Okay. Okay. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks to